Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Bushels. Today's guest is Mitch Konen from Montana, a third-generation farmer and president of the National Barley Growers Association. We talk about life under the big sky, the challenges of irrigation, and what it takes to keep a family farm alive in barley country. Let's get into it. Good afternoon. How are you today?
Doing good, Mitchell.
Is it weird saying your own name?
You got to remember, I'm Mitchell with one L and you're Mitchell with two L's.
I always think it's funny. With our name, everybody's always asking, is it Mitch or Mitchell? So finally, I just started saying, well, it depends if I'm in trouble or not. If I'm in trouble, it's Mitchell. If not, it's Mitch.
Yeah.
So where are you at, Mitch?
I'm in my home office here in Fairfield, Montana.
You're in Montana, huh?
Yeah. Yep. North central Montana. So I'm sitting in my house. There's a breezeway in between. So it's kind of a walk through between the garage and the main house. So I turned it into an office. So I'm 35 miles northwest of Great Falls, Montana. So I'm about 90 miles south of Glacier Park. I'm on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. I'm about 50 miles off, 40 miles, 50 miles just to the east of the Rocky Mountains. And then I'm 160 miles north of Yellowstone Park. I'm a third generation farmer. I'm past president of Montana Grain Growers Association. I am currently the president of the National Barley Growers Association. So I've been going back and forth to Washington, D.C. for over 10 years now.
Do you know who Doug Goings is?
Yeah.
You do?
I think so.
Out of Ohio? I think he is big on those boards. I interviewed him.
Yeah, that name sounds really familiar.
I think he was on National Wheat Growers.
Yeah.
He said he was next to Trump when they signed the big deal with Japan, and I think he was with them when they signed the China agreement too.
Probably, yeah. I was going back there at that time. I had a gal from China that came out here on the farm and interviewed me when that first deal came through that Trump signed with China. And then I met up with her in D.C. when I went back to D.C. one time. I gave her a call, let her know I was going to be in town. So I did another interview with her at that time. I've had 6 or 7 trade teams out here on the farm from Mexico, Central America, Korea, and mainly because I was in Montana Grain Growers Association, but the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee is the one that brings the trade teams in. And I only live 35 miles out of town, so I'm closer than anybody else. They always came out here. And I've been on Cotton Council. John Deere always put on a tour, a farm tour. First year I met him, John Gibson is the guy that runs that. They called me up and they toured my farm. It's probably been 10 years ago now, but they came up and toured my farm. And this was a bunch of guys from down south. They were sorghum growers out of Texas, sugarcane growers out of Louisiana and Florida area, but it was all southern growers and then cotton growers. And they came up north and toured my farm. We toured the irrigation company, their main office. We toured AB storage facility in town. I spent all afternoon talking to them about the water and the canals and everything else and the pivots, and they were just amazed by it. And it was raining on us the whole time. And I told them guys, I said, you guys can come up and visit anytime you want. This first rain we've had in 5-6 years. We've never had a rain like this. And I think we got like 3 inches of rain that day. So I said, you guys can come back anytime. They haven't been back, so we haven't been getting any rain. Then I went on a cotton tour down in Lubbock, Texas, twice, and Lubbock and Amarillo. And then I also went on a cotton tour down in the Delta area around Arkansas, Missouri, and Tennessee. So I've met a lot of people over the years, and I tried for an office at NOG because when I was in grain growers, we were members of NOG and National Barley. My main goal was to be president of National Barley, and I made it.
There you go.
I tried for an office at NOG, and I didn't make it. The guy who's president now, if they wouldn't have selected him, that would have been me, probably. And I'm glad I didn't get it because I just did 2 years as vice president of National Barley, and this is my first year as president.
Good work.
So we're fighting for all of the brewers, all of the maltsters, all of the producers, and the distillers. So that's what we're all about is the whole barley industry, which is kind of turned into pet food. A lot of it's going into pet food. Some of it, they're trying to figure out how to make it into human food too.
Stuff changes pretty fast, doesn't it?
Yeah. We're between coarse grains, and we actually are a small grain, but you got your coarse grains, you got your small grains, and then you got your nuts and fruits and oils and oil seeds and stuff like that. And barley is United States. Barley is a big industry, but it's only the United States only supplies 3% of the world's production, which is really, really small. And we're ranked like number out of 100 countries, I think, that grew barley. We were ranked like 40 or 50.
Right in the middle.
Born and raised right here. Yep.
How far away from Canada are you?
About 95 miles.
Really? Do you make any trips up there to go fishing or hunting?
Not into Canada. I can get into Canada. It's really tough getting back into the United States.
Not worth the risk.
Anymore, yeah. I used to years ago. Used to go up for the farm shows and everything up in Lethbridge. We used to take kids up to Calgary. When they were a lot younger, we'd go up to the Heritage Park up there in Calgary and the zoo and whatnot. You got to have birth certificates for the kids, and you got to have your passport to go back and forth. And then getting into Canada is not a hard thing. It's getting back into the States.
They want to keep you over there once you get there.
Again.
Talk to me a little bit about, I won't say lifestyle, but I've never been out there. So are you out in the middle of nowhere? Kind of describe the landscape of where you're at out there.
Well, where I'm out in the plains, basically. So I'm out on the flat plains, and they're basically like plateaus. There's a lot of river bottoms. South of me is the Sun River, which is about 15 miles straight south of me is the Sun River, and that comes out of the mountains. And that is where we get our water for irrigating. And then I've got a little stream to the north side of me that's called Muddy Creek. And then the Teton River is another 20 miles north of that. And those are the two main rivers that come out of the mountains where I'm at. So I'm out on the pure prairie plains. I actually live on a federal irrigation project that was established back in 1926, part of the Reclamation Reformation Act, when the country was pushing people out here and giving them land for free or really cheap, and they had to prove it up. So there's a little over 82,000 acres that's irrigated from those rivers, or from the Sun River anyway. It's kind of a plateau up here. There's actually 3 different benches. Each one of them is about 100 foot above the other one. And water comes in on that top bench, and then it comes down to the lower benches through the canals and the drains and whatnot. It helps irrigate that whole 83,000 acres. Then it runs on down into the Missouri River down by Great Falls. Teton River actually runs north and goes up into the Marias River, which ends up dumping into the Missouri River on the eastern part of the state around Fort Peck Reservoir. I guess it dumps into the Missouri before that, over in the middle of the state, kind of to the east side of the state. It's just prairie lands. It's short grass prairie. It's what we call short grass prairie. The grass doesn't get hardly ankle high, maybe knee high if we get plenty of water, but it's mostly pure prairie, just where the buffalo and elk and the deer used to roam, and the bears and the wolves. So a lot of cow country around here. There's a lot of dryland farming to the north of me and to the east of me. South of me is a lot more rugged with mountains and everything else, so it's a lot of forest land and a lot of grazing land.
A lot of people around you, or are you kind of out in the middle of nowhere?
I do have a neighbor that's half a mile away from me, but then the next on either side of me, my closest neighbor to the east is 2 miles away. It's on a bench, and it's a federal irrigation project. The thing is everybody got 160 acres. So there used to be a house every 160 acres is how it started. Over the years, ground has come together, and a lot of them houses have gotten old and dilapidated. Some of them are still there. They're just dilapidated, and they're inside of a shelter belt. They still sit in a corner of a quarter section, and a lot of them have been refurbished, and they're still being used. There's a lot of what they call resettlement houses that are still around here, which was back in the 40s and 50s, the resettlement program after the Great Depression opened this up for people again. Back at that time, government come out and help build houses for people. So they're called resettlement houses. There's quite a few of those around yet. But usually there was a house every 80 acres to 160 acres.
Are you in one of the original houses?
I am in a homestead house here, yes.
One that was built on the irrigation project?
I think this house here was built in early 50s. The original house was built in the late 40s, early 50s. The guy built it himself. Right next to me, on the other side of the shelter belt, there was another house over there at one time. That house is gone. This one here, somehow this ground got split up. Anyway, when he built this house, it was in the 50s, so then it was added on. My dad added on to it. We started adding on to it, and I actually moved into this house when I was 11 years old in 1971. Well, I've been in all but 2 years. I've been in this house since 1971. Me and the wife bought another farm and lived there for a while until my dad retired. We were living in the old house and we had 3 kids, and the house was kind of small. It was a resettlement house built. Well, it was probably before that. That house was built in 26 or something, 1926. And it was pretty small. And I told Dad, I said, I either need to tear the house down and build a new one, or I need to gut it and refurbish it and add on, or I'll buy you a house in town and I'll move into your house. He said, yeah. He said, don't worry about it. I just bought a house in town. So it worked out good.
Really?
15 years ago, I moved into this house, me and the wife and the kids. That's just how things worked out. You know, it was a progression. I went to college for a few years and wrestled the first 2 years. So I really didn't take much for classes, and they were in quarters at that time. They were on quarters. For the next 2 years, I would quit school in the spring, come home and help farm. Did that for a couple of years and came home, farmed for a couple of years. And then my dad and my aunt said if I'd ever decided to go back to school, that they would pay for it. So I ended up going back to school. So it was an 8-year program to get through college, but graduated in 1986 from Montana State University in Bozeman with an ag business and economics. Ag business major and an economics minor, I guess it was at that time.
Is that where you wrestled at too?
I wrestled at MSU, yeah.
Do they have a pretty good wrestling program?
They just weren't making enough money and everything was turned into football and basketball. So there wasn't enough teams around in our conference that had wrestling. That was the last year that University of Montana out of Missoula, that was the last year they had their program. And then there was only a couple of other little programs. Back then we were Division I AA, I think, and they kind of changed those. And all of them smaller schools were a different division, but we wrestled them all the time. I wrestled in Salt Lake City, Provo, Utah, Pocatello, a lot of Northwest state universities is who we wrestled the most, but it was fun. It was just me and 20 other guys from Montana walked on a team and had all of varsity positions away from full ride scholarship guys from out of state. And they wouldn't give us their scholarships, so we all quit them the second year, and that folded up the program.
Really?
Yeah.
It's probably hard for schools up there to recruit people in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it is. We're getting ready to go into hibernation mode here pretty soon here. The next week or two, it sounds like. So
What do you mean hibernation mode?
everything's pretty much dead here. The grass is browning off pretty good, and mainly because it's dry. The trees are all losing their leaves right now. We haven't had any freezing weather yet, but it sounds like it's coming the end of the week, into next week. We're basically pretty barren winter for 9 months until March. Usually by this time of year, we've got a foot of snow on the ground already and freezing at night with 40-degree highs. We're used to 20 below, 40 below weather in the middle of winter. Couple different times. 1978 was the last really big winter we had. We've had a couple since then, but nothing like that year. That was a record-setting year. I remember going out and me and Dad going out to feed cows, and plowing through the snowbank to get to the cows, and they were up against the fence, and then cut the fence down so that we could get the cows in to get them something to eat and even drink because they couldn't go nowhere. Snow was so deep. But we haven't had winters like that for a long time, so we rely on all of that winter snowpack up in the mountains coming out of the rivers for our irrigation systems. For the last 5 years, we've been in some kind of a drought, basically. Almost 3 years now. It's gotten really rough. We pay for 24 inches of water, 2 acre feet of water on our taxes on all of our allotted ground. We buy 2 feet of water every year, whether we use it or not. We have to pay for it. The last 2 years, we've been allotted only 12 inches. This last year, they shut the water off August 10th. I think it was about August 10th or August 12th. And most of the time, we have water till the end of October.
And you still have to pay for the full 24 inches?
We still have to pay for the whole 24 inches. 5 years ago, it used to cost us $16.50 an acre for our irrigatable acres. This year, last 3 years, we've seen major jumps in that cost. I think we're pushing $52 an acre now that we're paying for water, whether we use it or not.
That's crazy.
Yep. And that's just due to some management issues at the irrigation company over the years that we've changed managers, we've changed board members, and things were kind of going backwards. So this next year is our 100-year, 2026. This irrigation project started in 1926. So we're going to be celebrating our 100 years. And a lot of the facilities here are 100 years old. That's all the concrete checks and siphon tubes that go down underneath the river and come up the other side, as well as some line ditches and stuff like that. It's about 100 years old this next year.
So you have irrigation over all your acres?
Yep, pretty much. I'm farming a little over 1,100 acres on the irrigated portion, and then I also have 500 acres of dryland. So it's about 15, 20 miles away, about halfway to Great Falls.
So let's expand a little bit on your farm operation. You talked a little bit about under pivot. I'm assuming it's pivot, right?
Yeah. So when we started out, we were flood irrigation. It was all gravity flow canals and lateral ditches and stuff like that. So it used to be all flood irrigation. So back in, about the 70s, side rolls came in, wheel lines, sprinklers. So they were high pressure sprinklers. And then I think about in the 80s is when the pivots started coming in. So most everything I have is under pivot now. I got a pivot just about everywhere I can put one, and so does everybody else anymore. The last year or two, a lot of guys have been putting corner swings on, so they don't even have to flood irrigate their corners anymore. I've only got one of those. Most everything else I have are windshield wipers. They only do 80 acres on a swing. Some of them are only a quarter circle, and some of them are 3/4 of a circle. So it just depends on where a house is or what the topography looks like around here. I'm managing 12 pivots on that 1,100 acres. When me and Dad first started out, when it was flood irrigation, when I was growing up, one man could handle 320 acres, which was the limitation at that time on the irrigation project, because the irrigation project had limitations. You could only own 160 acres when it was first developed. And then they increased it in the 60s to 320 acres. You could farm 320. Well, one man, that's about all one man could handle, was 320 acres and keep the water going on it. And then when sprinklers showed up about in the 70s, then it got moved up to 640, and now we're limited to 960. That's 960 owned or leased, and 960 in my name, 960 in my wife's name. So I could be 1920 if I wanted to.
That's just irrigated, not total land?
That's irrigated land. Yeah, that's allotted irrigated land. That's all we can own. It's a little different than any other kind of farming, like dryland farming. There's no limitations on it. So we do have limitations. It's been a progression, you know. We went from that 160 to 320 to 640. It actually went to 720, I think, after that, and then finally to 960. And they kept changing the rules and regulations a little bit. It used to be when we first got started, Dad had put 160 acres in my name, 160 acres in the kid's name, and one of my brothers or sister's names, plus him and Mom's. So that's how we got up to the 640. And then they changed their policies again and said, no, you have to be actively farming and you have to be 18 years old and all this other stuff. That kind of changed things over the years. I'm a sole proprietor here, and there's quite a few people out here that don't do corporations on the irrigated just because we're so small. The guys that are incorporated and everything else, they play the game incorporating so they can get more land. And then the irrigation company changes their policies. And now the federal government has done it through FSA and whatnot, that it all has to come back to one social security number. So that kind of puts a kink in everything again. So then you got to change entities again. Drylanders are all incorporated because they got multiple entities just to maximize the government payments.
These people that found a way to work the system to buy more acres, let's say, bought some under their son's name or daughter's, and then they switched to regulations where they had to be actively farming in 18. Were those acres grandfathered in, or did they have to sell them?
They had to find a way to make sure somebody was involved in it, or there was a few people that had to sell some land, had to liquidate some land. Not very many. A lot of them just got bigger, and most of the times it worked out because that's how we brought young farmers in. And, they had a kid that was going to come back to the farm anyway, and it worked out. So a lot of times it just worked out that families got to keep the land because somebody was coming back to actually farm it, and it actually just forced the issue to split mom and dad and the kids on the different land, and it always worked out good that way. But these days, you don't see a whole lot of that anymore because there's just way too many other options for a lot of the younger people to go to the urban side of life, I guess, and not stick around on the farm.
11 pivots, probably a lot of maintenance on those, isn't there?
Yeah, it's actually 12 that I have, I guess. Yeah, that's a lot of maintenance. We're an open ditch system. We don't have wells, so nothing's automatic, and you don't know if that water's up or down in that canal that might disappear on you at night because somebody's turned the gate open up above you or something so they could irrigate their yard at night while nobody was watching, and you'd lose water and your pivot would go down. Then keeping the screens clean on the sump and stuff like that. So usually got to make a run every morning and every night just to make sure all of the sumps and screens are clean and that the pivots are turning and are working and whatnot. You learn how to be an electrician and learn how to work with 440 volts. It's either that or you wait for a technician to come out and help you with a lot of it. But you change contactors on towers and drive motors on towers and gearboxes on towers and stuff like that. It's a lot of maintenance. Our biggest thing is flat tires, changing out tires. You become a tire man, you're pretty good at changing tires sometimes too.
I know tires go flat, but what causes them to go flat out there? They run stuff over, or they just get old?
They're in water all the time. They're in mud, and then they're in that sunshine. So a lot of times they just get deteriorated by the environment.
Dry and cracked?
Yeah.
How often do you have to replace them?
So, 12 pivots, and you got usually 14 tires per pivot. That's quite a few tires. And I think this year we only had 3 flat tires. Last year, I think I only changed 1 the whole year. Year before that, I went through a truckload of tires. Everything's probably 20 years old, and it's just a cycle. So they start deteriorating, coming apart.
Not small tires either.
No, we got everything from 11/22/5s to 11/24/5s up to now most of them that we're putting on are and changing a lot of them over are 38s, 38-inch tires. It's almost tractor size by the time you get out there, do that.
I wonder if they're ever going to switch to like an airless, like on some of these lawnmowers.
There's people have tried them over the years. They've got plastic tires that you bolt onto a wheel, and they're plastic, but you end up with the same issues. That plastic deteriorates in the sun, and then the bolts start coming out and they start tearing. These new ones are called shark tires, I think. And I'm demoing a few of them on a couple of pivots. And a lot of it comes down to how big a rut you want in the field where that tower goes through, because it creates ruts and they knife into the ground pretty good when it's wet. So there's a lot of them there running just some rubber cleated steel that you can bolt onto a wheel so it's airless. You don't have to worry about flat tires, but it changes the rut. They're usually a little wider. Seems to me like they're just about as deep as a regular tire. Yeah, they're not too bad with a combine, because the combine's got big tires and duals on the front and big tires on the back. And we usually cut with them ruts anyway, so we ain't jumping across them all the time, because the headers like to bounce over them and everything else. And we're usually cutting close enough to the ground. Them ruts, they stick up out of the ground 3 to 4 inches too, where it squishes the mud up out. So it makes a 3 to 4 inch berm there. And they're usually about as hard as a rock by the time we harvest. So they'll break sections and guards off sometimes.
I'm looking at some of these tires, like some of these airless irrigation tires are like $1,400 a piece.
Yep. Yeah, they're expensive. Tough pill to swallow sometimes. I can get a tire change, put a new tire on for $250, $300.
So when you're swapping tires, do you just have extra rims? That way you just go out there, bolt on, or you actually leaving the rim on and replacing the rubber right there?
Yeah, when I first got started, is you took it off, took it to town and got it fixed. And then one of the irrigation pivot companies decided to bring in truckloads of tires for us. So I'd bought quite a few tires and had them stored in the shed and tubes. And I just bring them home and fix them myself, replace them myself. And then when those ran out and we started going to the 38s, I've been swapping a lot of them out with 38s. So the 22.5s, I've got lots of spares of those already made up. So that's all I have to do is take one out and unbolt the old one and put the spare wheel and tire on. And then I've got a couple of them laying out here now that I need to get new tires and tubes put on now. So I've got half a dozen spares. Of course, I got 3 different kinds of pivots. I got Olson's, Valleys, and Renke's. So each one of them is different. You got to keep them matched up because the gearboxes are the same on the tower. So you got to have the same size tires on there in order for them to stay synced up. Otherwise, you're putting too much pressure on drive lines and stuff like that.
Sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It is. Between that and trying to keep track of the water, we order water from the irrigation company in 48 hours in advance and hope we get it within the 2 days. And then when we want to go off with it, we got to give them a 12-hour notice going off with it, trying to make sure that that water's running across the ground somewhere. We don't waste it. We don't like it running off the edge of the field and going into the drains. Yeah, we're paying for it, but it's just conservation measures. We just try to be as conservative as we can with our water and use it. And we found out over the years, I've been working with the university ever since I graduated. We started a irrigation scheduling type of program, and we were cooperators with the university extension on that when these pivots started coming in, and trying to come up with irrigation scheduling, trying to reduce our pumping costs and also our water usage. We developed that and working with them now, still trying to get it reduced down, because when we flood irrigate, we always figure we're putting 6 inches of water in the soil because that's our soil water holding capacity. We used to irrigate everything twice, so that's 12 inches. That's the most we've ever put on anyway when we were flood irrigating. Since we went to sprinklers, we were trying to go 12 to even 18 inches of water with the sprinklers, trying to use up that whole 24 inches. I'm still working with them, and we've got it down to where I can almost raise my crop on 6 to 8 inches as long as I got it timed out right on the crop stage. And we've really increased our efficiencies on everything.
So you talked about having to give the notice to the irrigation company. How does that work? How are they controlling that when everything is coming in through these ditches?
They control what's going down each ditch. So we have 3 main canals. We got one main canal that comes down to outside of town there, and then every canal comes off of there. They hire guys as what we call ditch riders, and they control the amount of water that's going down every canal. So they can move it around. So if a few guys up the ditch a ways aren't irrigating, they just send it down to me. So they increase and decrease the amount of flow that comes down the canals, even from the main canal, from our reservoirs. So we have one main reservoir up in the mountains is our initial reservoir, and then we have a couple re-regulation reservoirs further down that store a bunch more water. So the main canal coming from out of the mountains down to our re-reg reservoirs will only hold 1,350 CFS. And the main canal that comes out of our re-regulation reservoir, which is called Pishkin, that one can deliver up to 1,650 CFS down here to where the irrigation bench is at. So they'll increase and decrease the amount of water that's coming down. And it takes about 2 days for that water to get from there down to the bench, to the town of Fairfield. That's why you got to give them 48-hour notice up in front. Why only 12 hours when you go to turn it off? Because usually if I get done with some water, somebody else down the ditch wants to come on with it. It just gives them 12 hours to get it moved from me to him, and then they don't have to increase the main canal.
How does that work? So let's say you call for so much water, they fill your canal. Do you have to use all that?
Yep.
I was going to say they can't send it back.
Not right away, they can't, whether you get the water. You might order it 48 hours in advance. You might not get it for another 12 to 24 hours later. If he doesn't have it and he doesn't have the capacity in his ditch and there's too many other guys irrigating, you might have to wait another day. Might be 3 days before you get it. You kind of got to play the game with them a little bit. Most of my ground is on the end of the ditches, so I'm feast or famine. I'm either flood or drought all the time. And so I tend to seed my crops usually about a week behind everybody else, because when they start irrigating, then their drain water comes down to me and I get to irrigate for nothing. And then when they get done with water, they're shutting it off, looking for somewhere to go with it. That's about the time I start needing it. So it works out pretty good. You just kind of schedule it out, time it out according to your neighbors as well. So it always works out pretty good.
You get a little backwash from people that aren't using their water. It makes their way down to you.
Yeah, I've irrigated quite a bit of ground and not been charged for it. So
We won't tell anybody.
well, it keeps it from going down the drain. That's the main thing. We just don't want it to drain.
How much water do you suppose gets lost through draining through the base of those canals? How are the canals made? Are they just dirt bottoms or what?
Yep. Most of them are dirt bottoms and they're on the contour. So usually anywhere between 4 to 6 tenths elevation drop per foot. 4 to 6% slope is about what everything is at. And over the years, they've lined a lot of ditches with concrete just because some of them leak too bad. And if they leak too much, then they'll go in and try to mitigate that loss by lining a ditch with concrete.
Which irrigation project you say you were on?
Greenfield Irrigation Project.
I'm just kind of looking at pictures now because I've never seen anything like it before.
Yep.
I'll have to write that down.
A lot of people haven't. I've had a lot of tours, producer type tours. I've had a couple of them come through and look over our facilities out here and stuff like that, and they're just amazed at our system, our irrigation system.
So the actual pivots and stuff like that, they're pretty advanced.
Yeah. A lot of them are. I got GPS on just about all of mine, which just basically controls the timing, the speed. I can control the direction whenever I want to. A lot of other guys have gone to telemetrics so they can keep track of it on their phone or on their home computer where they're at. It's kind of hard to start them up because you got to go prime the pumps anyway when it's an open system like ours, as opposed to a well type system where you can just push a button and start the well. We have to prime our pumps out here in order to start the pump. So that part is not automated, but a lot of guys put an app on their phone so they can watch their pivots in case it goes down. They get a notification that it's down, that it quit. It'll tell you either you ran out of water or one of the towers is stuck or something like that. And I haven't gone that far yet because it's an added cost with a subscription, an annual subscription, and all that kind of stuff. And you got to go out and check them anyway. So I can see most of them from my house anyway. So I don't have to drive very far to check them all.
You keep mentioning tower. What's the tower?
So a pivot has a center point that's anchored to the ground, and then each span, and then you have a tower. The tower's got the wheels on it, has the drive wheels on it. A quarter-mile machine has 7 spans, so they'll have 7 towers. So each tower, that's the controlling mechanism and the motion mechanism for that pivot.
So the tower is where the wheels are?
Yep.
Are they getting where these pivots can, if you have a pivot in the middle of like a square 160, it could pretty much cover that perfect square now?
Yep. I just put one in on the only full quarter section piece of ground I have. It's got a corner catcher on it, what they call a corner catcher or a corner sweep. And it's just another added span on the end, and that's all controlled by GPS as well. That last tower is running pretty close to the edge of the field when it gets to the sides of the squares, and then that swing arm will swing out into that corner, and it's the length, pretty much the length of a span, and then it's got overhang that's just about as long as the span is, and then it reaches out into that corner. And that quarter section, 160 acres, I think it only misses like 4 acres, about an acre in each corner.
If you had a pivot with the gun on the end, how much does that not cover?
Most of the end guns run about, they'll spit out there about 75 to 100 feet off the end of the pipe. That's what gets it out there. The GPS shuts them guns off, shuts a bunch of nozzles off. It's all controlled by air. It's got an air compressor on it, and there's a valve on every nozzle, so it puts down the same amount of water from the center all the way out to the end as it walks around the field.
That wouldn't get near the coverage as a corner sweep, though, right? The end gun wouldn't get near the coverage as a corner sweep.
No, it doesn't. Originally, what was on there was a quarter-mile pivot, and that end gun would reach out there, and I still have, I'd probably have 6 acres in each corner, 6 to 7 acres out of each corner that I was still flood irrigating if I could get water to it without tearing up too much of the ground.
Yeah, that's interesting. What kind of crops are you growing out there in Montana?
Mostly out here, we raise malt barley for the brewing companies. We do raise winter wheat, spring wheat, have raised canola, yellow peas. There's a lot of chickpeas in the country, but this bench, the irrigation project here and the town of Fairfield, which has been monikered as the barley capital of the world, malt barley capital of the world. There's a big sign in town that says that. And Anheuser-Busch actually has a storage facility in our little town of Fairfield, 750 population. They've got a storage facility there that will hold 3.5 million bushels of storage. During the 70s, early 70s, that's when malt barley got started here. Coors first originally started here, and then Anheuser-Busch has kind of taken over. Coors kind of left the country for a little while and then came back here about 10, 12 years ago. They built a storage facility 12 miles east of me, a little town of Power that holds 3.5 million bushels of storage as well. And it's on the main line, railroad line. Town of Fairfield is on a spur line. And when Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, BNSF bought out a lot of the other short lines that were around the country, that railroad used to make a loop, come through Fairfield and go right back to Great Falls. Well, they pulled a lot of them tracks out. And now it's just a spur line that comes off the main line that follows Interstate 15 north and south. It comes out here and services a little town of Shodo north of me and Fairfield. And that used to be the number one dollar carrying short line coming in and out of Fairfield in the country, because it was hauled a lot of Anheuser-Busch barley out of this country. The beer market has declined over the last quite a few years. Barley demand has dropped significantly lately, and we aren't producing quite as much barley as we used to, but That's what built this country around here. Bought a lot of farms, bought a lot of equipment for people, was that malt barley.
The demand for beer is going down when the population's increasing so fast.
Too many choices. You got your White Claws and you got all these other flavored drinks now. Everybody's trying to make a dollar, so they all come up with a new drink, and we're hoping it's just a cycle. You see the cycles between spirits, whiskeys, and vodkas and stuff like that. And, people's taste, they kind of change over time. So right now, the younger crowd is more into the White Claws and the infused drinks. Us old timers, we still like our beer.
I will say over the past 10 years, it's become way more normal or accepted to not drink. You see that a lot more, where when I was in college, 15 years ago, you were weird if you didn't drink. Now it's not that case anymore.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. People have kind of slowed down on the drinking. We've learned, it's one of those vices that, and that came with DUI laws and stuff like that. And it probably got a little out of hand back when I was going to school too. So then when they started changing the laws to start help protecting us, it changed our attitudes a little bit.
I think that, and a lot more people are into the health and fitness. People realize it's not that good for you.
Yeah. Well, when I go to my barley meetings, I always got to explain to everybody, there's a pork chop in every can. So you don't need to sit and eat 6 pork chops. Just have one beer. That's all you need.
I like having a beer now and then, but I might have a beer every 3 or 4 weeks. Started tracking my sleep, and I was reading somewhere that one beer can really affect your sleep. Looking at my watch, I had a beer last night. My sleep was terrible. A couple days later, be great. If you have one beer, man, it messes with your sleep. You wouldn't think one beer would, but
it helps me sleep, I think.
I bet it helps you fall asleep, but I bet your quality of sleep's less.
Probably, yeah.
Everybody likes a good beer. What do you drink out there?
I usually drink a lot of Budweiser products. I'm kind of drinking the Mexican stuff now, but that's because I'm growing barley for Constellation out of Mexico. So drink a lot of Modelo. Used to drink a lot of Canadian beer with the old boys from Indiana there, and they used to come out here, Brian and Scott and those guys. It was called Kokanee.
Really?
The only place they ever saw it was out here in Montana when they came out here for training classes for farm works. They liked it so much that when they came back out the next year, they loaded up the van and took as much Kokanee back to Indiana as they could.
Do they have Busch Light out there?
Oh, yeah. A lot of Anheuser-Busch products around here. Yeah. A lot of Coors products. A lot of everything else. I mean, there's a lot of people, when the brew pubs started getting big and the brewers, Montana is one of the biggest states for brew houses, independent brew pubs. So there's all kinds of different beer, Belgian whites and different kinds of reds and everything else that everybody makes, and the dark beers. Lip Ripper is a name for one of them.
Yeah. Lip Ripper?
Lip Ripper, yeah.
Sounds like you're going crappie fishing.
That's what we call fly fishing, lip rippers. Fly fishing is pretty big in Montana.
I'd love to go out to Montana sometime. Big hunter, so that's big on my wish list.
Yeah.
Go out there, get a big elk.
Used to do a lot of hunting back in the day, but not so much anymore.
Are the elk in your area, or are they more towards the mountains?
No, they're more up in the mountains. We've pushed them off the prairies over the years, and they go back in the wilderness, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which is about 60 miles west of me there. It's inside the Rocky Mountain front. Bob Marshall Wilderness, there's a lot of elk back there, and then they migrate out and actually winter on what we call a Sun River game range. And we can go up there in the wintertime and take your binoculars, and there's just thousands and thousands of elk running all over the place. And usually when we were elk hunting, we'd be just inside the Forest Service line, and we'd try to catch them as they're coming out. It just depends on the timing, depends on what the weather's doing and all that other kind of stuff. How fast they come out, what drives them out.
Do the mule deer stay in your area?
So we have a lot of deer around here. I'm not sure what they really are. They're more of a whitetail. It's a black tip whitetail, basically. They're small. The big mule deer are up in the mountains, out in the prairies, in the Missouri breaks and stuff like that. But You get out here where I'm at, we have a lot of white-tailed deer around here. They're not much bigger than a really big dog.
Really?
Yeah, they're pretty small. 150, couple 100 pounds is all they are. That's about it.
Is the hunting pretty popular where you're at?
Yeah, around here we do a lot of pheasant hunting, a lot of duck hunting. Freeze Out Wildlife Management is just a couple miles to the west of me here. It's a big, just like it sounds, freeze out. It used to be a military outpost there way, way back in the days, and there's no trees around. But they run some of the extra water, excess water that comes off the bench, and it's kind of a big bowl, so it fills up with water. And then the snow geese come down through here. Snow geese and the Canada geese and the trumpeter swans. We're part of the Pacific Flyway from Alaska down to Mexico when them birds are migrating north and south. They'll hold up here, sit on that water out there, and then they come out and glean our fields off in the fall and the spring. I'll have 160 acres covered in just solid snow geese when the big flocks come in.
If you have all that, well, they probably won't allow you flood some of those fields for duck hunting.
No, we don't have any water, so we only have water between, usually irrigation water is only out here on the bench. I think they started around the 1st of May to the end of October, or first part of October.
Looking at your time on the farm, what gives you the most pride? Is it the lifestyle, the challenges you have to endure out there?
It's watching the crop grow. Every year, the older I get, I'm just more amazed that I put a seed in the ground and it comes up and grows. It just increases your faith in what you're doing and everything else, because that's what you got to have, is faith that's going to come up when you put it in the ground. That's probably the biggest thing that I can think of is, it's just proof that there is a God and everything else. We go out here and try to raise crops, stick a seed in the ground, and then have the faith that it's going to come up out of the ground. And then when it does make it, then I'm back in charge again. I got to keep it healthy and I got to make a good crop with it. It's been a living, but the other thing is you got to be real about it too, and it's a business. So we have to maintain that business mind of what we're doing out here. It's a lifestyle and it's a way of life, but it's a business too. It's got to pay for itself and it's got to pay for the rest of your life as well. So your livelihood. So trying to do a really good job on a lot of it, and then trying to outguess Mother Nature all the time, droughts, floods or hailstorms or whatever, and trying to mitigate those problems, environmental problems that we always have to deal with.
This might be tough for you to think about since you've been farming for so long. If you weren't farming, what else would you be doing if you had a choice of doing anything else?
Well, I did for a lot of years. I'd been in construction. When I came back farming, I didn't have enough acres and farming with my dad. So I spent a lot of time remodeling houses, re-roofing houses, which I got too old to be on a roof anymore. And one time I was going to be a mechanic. If I wasn't farming, I get to do all of that stuff. When I was growing up, I was in my dad's hip pocket the whole time, learning everything there was that he was trying to teach me and everything that he was doing when he was farming. So in the back of my mind, I always had a deal where I was going to be a farmer. I'd probably been a cowboy, but I'm too deathly allergic to cows, so I had to give that up too. And I'm allergic to everything on the farm, but I've learned how to deal with most of it. And the animals, I just couldn't. So man, I've turned my hand to everything over the years, between driving trucks, spent a couple of years on the road driving truck, and worked in welding shops for a number of years and in the off seasons and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to pick out one thing that I'd be doing if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, because doing this, I do it all.
Yeah. So what's the future look like? You got any kids that want to come back to the farm, or going to pass it down to the next generation?
He came in earlier, so yeah, I got one son that's around yet. I have two sons and a daughter. The daughter's a pharmacy technician. My oldest boy went into law enforcement, so he went into the Army and come out, and he went into law enforcement. He's transitioning now. He's going into driving truck now and has kind of gotten away from the law enforcement side of it. I really don't know that he likes the farming part of it. I've been trying over the years, and He likes doing some haying and stuff like that, but I don't think he likes the number crunching and everything else that we're doing here yet. And my other son, he knows what has to be done and everything else, but he just hasn't flipped that switch yet where he really wants to step into it. He's happy right where he's at, but I keep telling him he's got about 5 years to get it figured out because I'll be retiring soon.
How old is he?
He's 29. I was the same way. I didn't start till I was 31 years old. I was raised on a farm, but I didn't get married till I was 31, and I started as a partner. I partnered with my dad when I was 28, and we partnered together for about 10, 11 years before he retired. And then I got to take it all over at that time. His hardest part was letting go of the control. My dad's probably biggest problem when it came my turn to take over, I guess, was thinking he had to give up that control. Took him a few years, but I kept bouncing a lot of stuff off of him. And finally, a few years after that, he finally said, no, it's yours. It's your decision. But he still gives me some advice every now and then.
Is he still around?
Yep, he is. He lives in town. I lost my mom last year, but he's still around.
Does he make it out to the farm a lot?
Not a lot. He comes out every now and then. When we're seeding, he'll come out and he'll help us move equipment around. And in the fall, when we're harvesting, he'll come out and take a ride in the combine. But he doesn't want to run the machinery. He's a little too old-fashioned for that. He's used to the slow and steady and no bells and whistles and nothing more than 1 or 2 buttons. And all of this equipment is pretty high-tech anymore.
What do you run for a combine out there?
I was running a Case 2588 till last year, and when it went down and I had 800 acres of barley ready to go and looked like it was going to be 2 weeks before I could fix it, I ended up having to go buy a John Deere 780. And I used one, a good used one, and it actually cut everything last year in like 5 days, and I don't even remember it. And I just got done with this year's harvest, and I don't much remember it either because we waded through 1,650 acres, but it was over 30 days. So, I mean, it doesn't take long to cut out a field. So I got some newer equipment, but most everything else I got is older equipment. John Deere Combine is a 7-year-old or 8-year-old machine already. So
You gonna go back to Case someday?
I kept the Case. We got it put back together, and it's earned its keep. So it'll do the job if I need it. So I'll keep it as a second.
I think Case does a little bit better job cleaning grain.
This John Deere does a dang good job of cleaning grain.
Does it?
Comes to barley and wheat. Yeah, it does a lot better job in the wheat than that Case did. Get a lot of white caps in the Case sample, but just not quite a big enough cleaning area on that Case, but it does a really good job. It's been a good machine.
Your average field, how flat is it? I know you talked about 4% grade on the canals. Is that the same for the fields?
Yep. Less than 4% slope. Most of them are usually 1/10.5 to 2/10. So it's pretty flat. Yeah, right where I'm at, we're flat.
If you're standing up, like up on top of your house or something, how far can you see?
I can see Medicine Mountain up at Glacier Park, which is 100 miles away.
Really?
I can see the mountains south of Helena, which is 100 miles south of me, which is the Rocky Mountain front. Of course, they stick up in the air about 10,000, 11,000 feet, and I'm at just under 4,000 feet. That's why Montana's called Big Sky Country, because we can see forever. If I stand up on my house, I could almost see the Canadian border. If Sweetgrass, which is on the Canadian border on I-15, if it wasn't down in a coulee, down in a draw, I could see it, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
How far away from the Yellowstone Ranch are you?
The real Yellowstone Ranch is what, in Colorado? It's a long ways.
Is that where it's really at?
Colorado or Wyoming somewhere. It's not in Montana. I've never watched it. It's not filmed in Montana. I'd have to look it up, but I know it's not in Montana.
Yeah, the show is based out of Darby, Montana.
The ranch where they're filming that, I believe, is at the bottom of one of them big ski hills, whether it's Lake Tahoe or Vail or something like that.
I was hoping you'd see it. I'm just curious to see if some of the lifestyle and trouble they're getting in, if that's actually real out there. So if you were to look back from now until when you started farming, if you could go back, what's one thing you would have told yourself as a new farmer back to where you're at?
I probably would have started sooner. farming. But that's a function of what's going on with the rest of the world, with the family. And I had two younger brothers that were still around here. So I wish I would have started a lot sooner farming and been way more serious about things in my college years and whatnot. I probably would have gotten way more involved with farm organizations sooner. I did go to annual meetings, whether it was Farm Bureau or Farmers Union or Montana Grain Growers Association, and got along with all them guys. But then when I came back home when I was 28, Dad made me an offer I couldn't refuse to cab out cows and have half the calf crop and half the farm and go 50-50 on a partnership. I don't know that I'd change anything, really. I mean, I've had too many good life experiences that I want to change anything, but I should have probably paid more attention in college to the books. And I wish I'd have known now, with what I do now, I wish I'd have started that a lot sooner than I did. But then I probably would be a politician. I don't think I wanted to go that way anyway.
I don't know if anybody learns a lot from like in the books at college. I mean, you learn some, but a lot of it's just learning how to do life on your own, use your resources and make connections. Maybe I was just a bad student, but that's kind of how I felt about it.
I don't know. I think you hit it on the head there when you said it's a resource that we encountered at one time, that college degree or whatever it was, them college years, whether you got a degree or not, but it was that time of life when you learned how to live out on your own and everything else, and how to visit with people and interact with people and businesses. But we always got to look back on it as a resource, whether it was a resource of our education or a resource of how to handle people and stuff like that. We always got to keep them kind of resources in our repertoires of whatever we're doing. So
I can look back and I probably remember one or two things I learned in my microeconomics class or calculus. I don't remember agronomy classes. I remember some stuff from, but just the connections you make for the rest of your life. Everybody that has real close friends, they met them in college, not high school.
yeah, most of my high school and a lot of the kids that I went to high school with, there's a pretty fair share of them that are still around here. So I still run into them, but the college experience, there's a lot of people there that end up being good friends for a long time as well.
Yeah, in high school, you're kind of forced to hang out with who you hang out with. I remember when I left high school, I'm like, man, I'm never going to see my best friends again. You get to college and you realize I didn't have anything in common with these people.
And that progresses your whole life as well. How many alliances do you have and how many with different people? And that's finding that common ground, finding people that have the same common ground and everything is what we're always in search of, I think.
Time's precious. Don't waste it hanging out with somebody just because everybody else likes to hang out with that people. You got to be choosy about who you spend your time with.
Well, the thing is you got to be yourself. And that's the thing is I'm my own agronomist out here on the farm. I've gone to agronomy seminars and everything else, and I studied and took the test for the CCS or whatever the moniker is on that one to be an agronomist or a crop consultant. The thing was is I just didn't pay the $150 for the license, for the name tag. So just learned how to be my own agronomist and how to stage crops and how to look at soil samples and try to discern all of that and break it down. And the same thing with when I first started and when I was running, helping cab cows, or when I was taking over the cow herd and whatnot and the farm. And first thing my dad did when we partnered up is he threw the books on the table and I said, here, these are yours now. Until you learn how to do these books, I can't turn the farm over to you. It was part of that control and having that control. So I took it on, and that all was mostly in a shoebox or in an envelope in a file folder and computers. I only had 2 computer classes when I was in college, basic and Fortran. When I got to the farm, I wanted to computerize everything. So I turned everything. I created Lotus 1, 2, 3 programs for keeping track of the cows, and then used other programs and ultimately ended up with FarmWorks. And I've been running with them ever since. still do today. But whether it's Excel spreadsheets or whatever, I mean, I use it all. That computer's helped us do all of it. And now transferring over into another platform called Traction that's online, where they call it in the cloud. It's all cloud-based software. I use a lot of that cloud-based software, not just for the accounting and everything else. There's several other platforms that I use for doing different things on the farm. So keeping track of the records and stuff. And that's the big thing.
Some people are afraid of cloud-based platforms.
Yeah, they are. And my computer took a dump on me this morning before we got started. If somebody wants your information, they can find it, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's just on your computer that's hooked up to an internet. If they want it, they can get to it. You kind of got to let it slide sometimes, but you got to pay attention to what's going on all the time around you and keep a good eye on your bank account, and the rest of it will work itself out. I mean, you'll catch them someday, or they'll get caught someday doing something. I was leery of it till I got that John Deere combine and trying to integrate that into this whole programs, all these programs as well. That's the big thing, is just getting the integration amongst all the different platforms that are available. And I was kind of leery of John Deere for a long time. And now that I'm basically forced myself into it by buying one of their machines, you got to learn it. So you wonder how far it goes. Well, yeah, they're using it. I've spent some time in DC with a couple different organizations and talking with people back there. And I can guarantee you they're getting an aggregated amount of data. I don't know if they can pinpoint it right down to my farm, but they're aggregating that data to come up with the farm programs and projections on crops and everything else. And don't kid yourself, them satellite images can tell you exactly what's out there. So whether you report it or not, they know what's there.
They can know if you planted before insurance dates.
Sure. They can tell you exactly what crop it is too. There's the near infrared and all this other stuff. They're using 37 bands of light or 36 bands of light or 72 bands of light. There's programs out there, I've seen them. They'll do bands of light, and they can tell you where the bugs are. They can tell you where the diseases are. They can tell you which crop it is. I think they can tell you which tree it is that's growing right there in your yard too.
Won't be too much longer. The satellite imagery will be able to produce as high resolution as some of these drones do.
Yeah. Well, I think they already do.
Government has access. We don't.
Just depends on where it's at. Yeah. I remember my sister was in the Army and she was in Kuwait in the desert. And we finally got hooked up to the internet out here on the farm. And she sent me a picture of the farm from a satellite. I sent her a picture of a military base in the desert in Kuwait. And I said, "Are you at this one?" And she goes, "How did you get that?" I don't know if it was hers or not. She didn't tell me. She couldn't tell me. But I said, I got access to some of that too. And the resolution was pretty good, even at that time. Yeah, the resolutions they got on everything now is just amazing.
Yep, for sure. I think I talked to you about this, Randy, you passed the mic. So I'll ask you a question from the last guest. So the guy I interviewed this morning, very small farmer, dairy farmer out in New York, and he got started on his own. He didn't inherit anything. I think he kind of works with his parents a little bit now, but he struggled for a few years. Then right as things were starting to take off, his entire parlor burned down. He's still kicking. But his question was, so when you think about the thought process of everything that goes into the farm in terms of future decisions, what are those decisions geared towards? Are they geared towards putting you in a better position, or do you think about putting the next generation or your kids in better position for when they take over, if they do?
That's a thought process that goes through my mind all the time anymore, the older I get. I've always tried to keep this operation in a business mode because that's about the only thing that's going to ensure its survivability. Whether it's the advocating I've done at state level or national level and trying to make sure policies allow me the opportunity to be profitable. And it's a tough one. I know I'm on a family farm. My dad gave me the opportunity. And I think that's the big thing, is recognizing the opportunities when they start showing themselves. Sometimes we let some of these opportunities by. My dad has never given me anything. I've had to work for it. I own my own property. Over time, I bought my own property and I bought my own machinery. Dad never gave me any of the machinery. Dad has never given me any land. Everything I've got, I've worked for. His farm is his farm, and it's still his farm. I'm farming it. I rent it. And just like this house, I rent it. It's part of the rental agreement that goes with the land. It was an opportunity that was afforded me. And he does have everything in a trust. Me and my brother, we talked him into getting everything into a trust and setting it up the way they want their farm to go, where they want it to go and what should happen to it. I'm not privy to everything that's in that. I should be, but I'm not, because that's just the way mom and dad were raised back in that time. But I have an opportunity to buy out my brothers and sisters at probably a discount when the time comes, or they're going to have that business decision of their own, but it's going to be split up amongst the kids. So I had to build my own backstop, my own operation. And as I've progressed here now, and I'm getting close to retirement age, I'm going to treat it like a business. I mean, I still got to treat it like a business. If the farm won't service a lifestyle, then you got to find something else that will. There's a lot of things that I probably haven't done out here on the farm because it's not a sustainable practice to be doing it just to be doing it. It's got to be able to find its profitability. I've tried to set everything up in some kind of profit center type thing. As long as the machinery is paid for and it doesn't cost much to keep it going, it works really good out here on the farm. I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to make extra money to make the payments because they're already paid for, and learning to deal with what you got. And that's probably one of the big things out here in Montana that everybody lives with, is learning how to do with what you got, because we're a long ways from any of the good stuff. Better stuff comes at a price. Something breaks down out here, I got to be able to fix it myself. One of the sayings in Montana, you're a mile and a half from nowhere, which means you're an hour and a half away from nowhere. And when you get to nowhere, you're still another hour and a half away. I go to get parts. Sometimes it's a 5-6 hour drive to get parts for something. And if you can fix it at home, you fix it at home. And, if you're not driving that far, then you're waiting 4 or 5 days. Next day air is 3 days away here. I guarantee you, if you order something and can find a part and you next day air it, it's 3 days away. And usually that third day, you got to call the shipping company and drive to Great Falls, which is 45 minutes away, and get it off of their loading dock. Otherwise, it won't show up on the farm for another day or two. Just depends on when that truck is making a run this direction, whether or not we get it. That's a hard question. Every farm is different. Every situation is different, but I think it's going to break down to just recognizing the opportunities that sometimes hide themselves, but they're there. It's just keeping an open mind all the time and keeping your eyes open and recognizing opportunities that come by and being able to latch on to them and make them worthwhile.
It's a great answer. I think life in general, that's a good motto. What do you have for a question for the next guest?
Which direction do you want that question to go? Probably going back to old school, back in the old days. Everybody made a living off of their farms. But I know when my grandparents first came into this country, homesteaded this ground, Grandpa had to work a second job, and my dad managed co-op for a few years before he came back to a farm when some land became available. And he didn't have a second job. And those were kind of the golden years, I think. When I started with my dad, but I had a second job usually in the wintertime. Why does agriculture seem to always have to have an off-the-farm job in order to sustain it? And I see that more and more all the time, even the advocating that I've done over the years. I say advocating instead of lobbying because I don't get paid. If I was getting paid, I'd be a lobbyist. And I've seen it in D.C. several times. Well, why don't you just go get a job in the wintertime to help support the family farm? And I said, well, sometimes I have to, but why should I have to rely on a second or a third job just to survive?
Your first job is already harder than most.
Exactly. My farm is my first job. I don't feel like I should have to have a second job to make it viable when I should have a free market system instead of being a price taker. Farmers, we pay the freight both directions. We buy it retail, we sell it wholesale, and we pay the freight both directions. And the market's supposed to be a free market system, but it's ultimately swayed one direction or the other with government reports, production reports. How accurate are they? Whether it's how many acres are going in, getting seeded, what's the yield coming off, and everything else. The markets are manipulated, I think. I can't be a true price taker. I get what I get. And as a producer of a commodity, I should be able to ask for the price that I want or that I need. Everybody wants what they can get, but I want what my cost of production plus a certain percentage over. And I'd like to have that same percent margin as any other business would have. Too often we're on slim margins.
Or negative margins.
And we always know that, so we always rat hole a bunch of money somewhere so that we can get through the bad times. My question, I guess, would be, is the farm first or is it second? Is it your first job or your second job? Because if it's your second job, are you going to farm the ground or are you going to farm the farm programs? Being I'm on an irrigated bent and I'm afforded higher yields than most anybody else in this state, the farm programs don't mean anything to me. I've never gotten a payment. When they shut direct payments off 15 years ago or however long ago it was, I've never received a government program or insurance indemnity that I could rely to live on. I do carry crop insurance and I'm getting paid pretty good this year on it, but it's paying its premium and that's about it. When I was growing up, the farm always carried itself and the direct payments is what we lived on. When the direct payments went away, that's why I had to go get a second job, just because there wasn't any direct payments weren't there anymore. I had to go make a living over and above the farm. The farm just barely carries itself.
People don't realize how difficult farming is. I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. It's been a lot of fun hearing a different perspective out of the Midwest.